Bill Clinton from Arkansas in the South. Another young, articulate outsider taking on the Washington establishment. So what does Bill Clinton stand for? You know what I always stand for? This country needs to rescue the American dream.
He was governor of Arkansas. Arkansas did not have a major black population at that point, but he appealed to, black voters and then became president. And as president, he generally had, it was a mixed record with African Americans. If you think carefully about who's winning the Democratic presidencies during this period, it's Lyndon Johnson, a Southerner, a white Southerner, Jimmy Carter, a white Southerner, and now Clinton. So the Democratic Party is trying to cast aside its ultra-liberal image by going to Southern moderates. And Clinton himself, who came out of, I would say, the New South, he had never supported segregation or anything like that. His record on race was, it was okay. Clinton spoke, in the tones of a Southern liberal.
I remember in the 90s being in the newsroom and all of the women, including the women of color, when Bill Clinton and Al Gore stepped onto the stage as candidates, they were like, I know who I'm voting for.
And I was a reporter in Orlando, Florida, and you have to be objective when you're covering the news, but those gathering who were of color knew that this was some kind of hope for us. And I remember that enthusiasm, and I remember that chatter.
He was a Southern, he had that drawl, and he just had that way about him. Once he went on to the Arsenio Hall Show and played that saxophone, black people fell in love with him.
A lot of why people thought that Bill Clinton was quote-unquote the first black president is not because he went on the Arsenio Hall Show and played the saxophone, even though that was part of it. It was also the fact that he came from a broken home with an alcoholic stepfather. He came from poverty, but he had a dream for as long as he could remember. He wanted to be president of the United States. And then he got a chance to meet his hero, John F. Kennedy, and that sparked that even more. And he went through all this adversity, all this poverty, to go to one of the most prestigious universities in America. And that's where he starts getting his education and then subsequently making his claim to his dream. If that's not the African American story, where we come from humble beginnings and told we'll never amount to anything, and go through societal barriers only to overcome anyway, I don't know what is.
You want to believe that one day there was going to be a black president, but he was the closest thing to that back then.
You've got the bust of FDR and the bust of Abraham Lincoln. How come those two?
I admired them both very much for different reasons.
What's the reason for admiring FDR?
Well, he gave the country confidence again when it was broken. And he tried things until he found something that worked, which is what I think you have to do in a time of change. I mean, in a different time, that's what I should be doing now. Lincoln, for obvious reasons, he understood that the whole legacy and future of America were at stake. And he gave his life for the Union. He had the ability to make people see big things in profound ways.
Bill Clinton was elected, and I was enormously happy because I thought that he was an exceptional politician, and I also thought that he was going to move the country in a different direction.
He had appointed a number of blacks to his cabinet. He had made also appointments of blacks to the federal judiciary. He was going to support a black candidate, a woman, to be the civil rights director in the Justice Department. But the conservatives mounted a campaign against her, and he withdrew the nomination. If his medical insurance plan that failed to get through Congress, his health care plan, had passed, then you could say that it would have been more beneficial for African Americans. But in terms of actual achievements, legislative achievements for African Americans.
I have very few expectations of Bill Clinton. I don't think it'll change the equation of power for African people in this country. And I'm hopeful that we will look towards one another to build the structures, economic and political, that we'll need in order to survive in this country.
And then you had Magic Johnson, who revealed that he was HIV positive.
Because of the HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers.
A lot of people kind of wrote it off as, well, you know, he has so many women, I ain't gonna have these many women, I don't get down like that.
I think sometimes we think, well, only gay people can get it, well, it's not gonna happen to me, and here I am saying that it can happen to anybody, even me, Magic Johnson.
So Magic had announced that he was infected a couple years prior. By the time I was on the cover of Essence magazine, AIDS was the #1 killer of African American women between the ages of 25 and 44, and it was the #1 killer of Black men between the ages of 25 and 44. We had surpassed diabetes, heart disease, cancers. We had surpassed.
Ray learned she was infected with AIDS by accident. It was 1986. She was working as a political organizer in Washington when she heard news about a blood shortage. So she organized a blood drive and gave blood herself. The routine test at the Red Cross revealed the AIDS virus. Ray was 24.
And so what my story did, what the Essence cover story did, was showed an ordinary Black girl who had an ordinary dating life, who had an education, who had a career, who was also infected and also dying from this disease. So we weren't addressing teenage sexual behavior. Our Christian values, we were taught, you don't get pregnant and embarrass your mama. We didn't know our risk factor or understand that AIDS was running rampant in our community because no one talked about the statistics in the African American community. Reagan didn't do jack about HIV, period. Under the Bush administration, we got the Ryan-White Care Act, which was funding, medicine funding for HIV. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, honest to God, was good on AIDS. In fact, Bill Clinton declared a state of an emergency in the African American community on AIDS, which freed up millions of dollars that would specifically go to Black-led organizations to do HIV/AIDS education. And what we saw in the 90s as a result of some of the funding and the education is that we began to see a decline especially among Black women with HIV as a result of and the Congressional Black Caucus I should add that the Congressional Black Caucus really partnered with Bill Clinton and really pushed, Maxine Waters pushed Bill Clinton on the issue, and he rose to the occasion.
The music was loud and we was laughing and joking around. 3 shots fired, he was killed. It really hurt. Why did this have to happen?
Unfortunately, Alicia's story is all too common. Children with their childhood taken from them. Fear of violence is robbing our children of their future. We must take away that fear and give them hope. We must give Alicia and all our children back their childhood. Working together, we can.
I just think that bill really did usher in this era of mass incarceration, of low-level drug enforcement that has just had a chokehold on the Black community.
In 1994, there was a lot of media attention on crime in Black communities.
We're in the worst period of violent crime in the entire history of this great country.
Prior to 1994, the Center for Disease Control stated publicly that young Black males were an endangered species. We were killing each other.
I believe mass incarceration is a crime against humanity. I've been blessed to teach in prisons for 51 years with my beloved brothers, and they rightly see Biden in as worse a view as they would view a Nixon or Reagan in that regard, because You know, Biden played a very fundamental role with the crime bill.
An awful lot of people were jailed for minor drug crimes after the
Exactly
crime
right.
bill. Was it a mistake to support it?
Yes, it was. But here's where the mistake came. The mistake came in terms of what the states did locally. That crime bill, when it voted, the Black Caucus voted for it. Every black mayor supported it across the board.
There were a lot of people who participated in this reactionary, over-repressive crime legislation in 1994. It's like the so-called war on drugs became a war on black America. It didn't end drug addiction. If anything, it prolonged it. And so what happened is, after 1994, a 10, 20-year period, mass incarceration of young black males happened. Whole lives, whole families were ruined. And so the crime bill didn't end crime in the black community. If anything, it prolonged it. And so, from my perspective, I think more attention should have been given to what are the causative factors that contributes to crime in our communities. And you just can't punish crime away.
And the results of that is mass incarceration, mass disenfranchisement of these neighborhoods, and mass instability of these very same neighborhoods that people have to reintegrate back into. So what I'd say to that is, I would like to see a portion of the money that was dedicated to the war on drugs in this crime bill, and I would like to see that attributed to mass reintegration, mass mental health care, mass funding for organizations who are on the ground like Life After Justice, who are helping people as they get out to reintegrate back into society.
I joined with a group of people in the House to provide for changing the system from punishment to rehabilitation.
The crime bill didn't affect me because I was in the state of New York at the time. It wasn't a federal charge that I had. But Giuliani was the mayor then, and Pataki was the governor. But how it did affect me was that they stopped the college program that year. Because my thoughts was, I'm in prison, I'm gonna go to college, I'm gonna get a degree, I'm gonna better myself. And they cut those programs out.
Mr. Louis Farrakhan called for $1 million to come to Washington. He made the call at the end of 1994, but we didn't really start organizing Me and March in 1995. So I was an organizer. Keep in mind, by 1995, I knew a little something about organizing. It was important for black leaders to sit down at the table and talk to one another. No one organization was going to provide the liberation of black America. This was about mobilizing.
Racism is immoral. Theologically, it's a sin. Morally, it's wrong.
We are the antitheses to the Republican Revolution. What you're seeing now is a revolution for self and self-kind.
We all college students. We came all the way from Jacksonville, Florida. Some of us with no money, but we had to be here.
And keep in mind, October the 16th, 1995 wasn't on a Saturday, it was on a Monday, which means you had to take something off to get there.
I am somebody. I am God's child.
And we weren't funded by any organization. The brothers paid for their own way to get. It was a sense of pride, a sense of asserting just not our manhood, but our humanity toward each other and toward the world at large. The so-called first black president leaves the White House, gets on Air Force One, and goes to Houston, Texas to make a speech about racial justice.
You gotta send a message to the White House. You gotta send a message to Bill Clinton. Why is Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton is in Texas right now, riding on a horse. He should be right here in Washington, D.C. He is afraid to stand up with black folks.
Scared, afraid of the Million Man March. Even members of Congress scattered at the Million Man March. We registered at the march on the mall, 250,000 people to vote on that one day. We had to pay a deposit to the Park Service and to the city of about $30,000 to clean up the mall after the march. We got every cent back because after the Million Man March, there was not one piece of paper left on the mall. The brothers were disciplined. The day of the Million Man March, black on black crime in America went down to 0. So we show we can do it one day.
The 96 race, of course, Clinton was running again. This time he would be challenged by Bob Dole, who was, again, an old-fashioned conservative. But his real problem in terms of African Americans was that in order to get reelected in 1996, Clinton thought that he had to become more conservative.
And I pledged that the United States government would take on gangs in the way we had taken on the mob decades ago. Our Anti-Gang and Youth Crime Control Act of 1996 will use the very same strategy our crime bill used to make the juvenile justice system tougher and smarter, and to help our young people stay drug-free and away from guns and gangs and violence.
And so we supported measures that were both going to bring more policemen on the streets, we're going to criminalize drugs like crack cocaine, in which were cheaper, that poorer people could afford, read that, as blacks, whereas whites who were taking powdered cocaine, it was not the same kind of enforcement. And he supported the end of the welfare system. So those things really hurt him in terms of his image with African Americans. But Clinton had done a great deal to cement the more moderate base in the Democratic Party by appealing to those Democrats, who had been lost to Reagan, who had been lost to the rhetoric of law and order and so forth. Those policies on crime, on welfare, appealed to a number of white voters. He also appealed to blacks. He had appointed a number of blacks to his cabinet. He had made also appointments of blacks to the federal judiciary. I think to Clinton's time was the largest blacks in cabinets as we have had to that point, and also the federal judiciary. So African Americans overwhelmingly supported him. White Americans who had defected to Republicans supported him. So he won in 1996.
Immediately, the brakes hit. It's because of Rodney King, because of the acquittal, because of the O.J. Simpson acquittal as well. And people said, I'm sick of this. I don't want any more. And then all of a sudden, conservatives came in, people voted for George Bush, and then everything started to change and become conservative again.